Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So move.
Okay,
Second.
made. We have a made and a second by Bob Burton, Jim Cardillo. Agenda. Okay, pardon? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. And I sent out minutes of our July 9th meeting. Kim, thanks for putting those minutes together. Have you all had an opportunity to review the minutes of the July 9th meeting?
Yes.
Yes, a question, Fred.
Yes.
On page 1 of the agenda, on page 1 of the minutes, under the agenda section, can we please correct the spelling of our esteemed colleague, Mr. Burden's name?
I did not pick that up. Now where is that?
The bottom of page 1. He is Mr. Burden, but he is not a burden.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Under the item agenda where it says Vice Chair Burden, that should be Burdon.
Thank you, Jim.
You're very welcome, sir.
Somebody looked at the minutes real closely. So, all right, with that correction, any other revisions or corrections? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the minutes without one correction.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jim, seconded by Bob. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Ayes have it. The minutes of our July meeting are approved. And I see that Faye Curry has joined us. Good morning, Faye.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much.
Sure, good to have you with us. Let's move down to reports. Roman 4 on the agenda. Before we get to Finance Department, Jim, anything from Audit Committee?
The Audit Committee, I think everybody kind of understands that there are 7 members of the Audit Committee. There are 3 members of the City Council, the FAC representative, and 3 citizen members. The term of 1 citizen member ended on June 30th. That has not been replaced as far as I know. In addition, another citizen member of the committee resigned in July. Actually, I believe it was late July. So the Audit Committee is down 2 citizen members right now.
Okay, thanks for that report. Any questions of Jim? Hearing none, we'll move to Finance Department report. So Jody, it's all yours. Any concerns? If there's anything general you want to report, if not, or after that, then you can go into the 2 agenda items: equipment loan and bands issuance status and updated revenue projections. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah,
There
we
you
do
go.
have a lot going on, but I'll spare you the gritty day-to-day details of our work and talk to this equipment loan tranche that we're borrowing. As you recall, the last couple of years, we've borrowed some funds from Bank of America. They won the RFP bid 2 years ago to provide this equipment. It's actually what I call equipment line of credit, but legally, I think it's called a lease. And we're using this final tranche. It's about 500. We're borrowing by $584,000. A small amount of that is for the issuance costs, but most of it is going towards the purchase of 4 large pieces of equipment. We have a dump truck, a pickup truck, a medic unit, and a 4th vehicle that I don't have in front of me right now, the vehicle list, but backhoe, pickup, medic unit, large dump truck. Those are the last 4 assets that we're going to buy with this loan. And like I said, this is the 3rd borrowing under this agreement, and we've got a rate of 1.52%. So it's a good, strong rate. And we are getting ready to sign the papers today so we can settle tomorrow.
Great. Anybody have any questions of Jody on that portion of her report? Okay, continue on, please.
Jim has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
When you say it's a lease, is the interest fixed or is the interest variable?
The interest is fixed. We have a payout schedule that they give us, and that the average coupon, that's the average coupon rate. The actual the true interest cost 1519. So that's the true interest cost 1519. There's different kinds of rates they state here, and it's the same thing as the average coupon rate. So yeah, it's
Thank you.
5196 is what the rate is.
Okay, thanks.
There's no variable rates in here, not in this one.
Okay, any other questions for Jody about the equipment loan? All right, continue on, Jody.
All right, so what's next? Updated revenue projections is the next thing. I just emailed you this morning a PDF report that I pulled together based on my projections. And I'm gonna have to open it over here. I don't have it open yet. Give me a minute. And I hope all of you have that. Did you see the email that came in with the PDF on it? Okay. So what you'll see there is it's very similar to the revenue categories as you saw in our budget, our operating budget. These are general fund revenues. And I revised my projections for FY20. And then I put here what the 21 adopted budget showed and what I'm anticipated for the revision of these revenues. And then the far right column shows you the difference, and we do have a shortfall from what I originally projected in the budget. As we can see, this pandemic is kind of stringing out longer than we thought. It's having an impact. The net effect, my projections right now show us short of revenue about 3,284,000. And that's different components, and you can go up the line there and see what the cause is. A couple of big factors were the state decreasing their pilot by $380,000. We also are taking a hit on the interest income because although I discounted my estimates for interest income, it didn't quite, I didn't anticipate we'd only be making 1/10 of the interest. That right now our rate was in August, it was 0.21%. as opposed to 2.7% same time last year. And I discounted my interest estimates by about 15%, and that was not nearly enough. So that's taking a hit. Now, hopefully that'll start coming up in this year as the economy improves. But you know, that's a big hit. We what was the other ones? Highway user revenues. The state gave me new estimates on highway user revenue fees. And we canceled the boat show, and that was $400,000 of revenue. So last year we actually got 500 something from it. So 400,000 what we had put in this year, and we had to take that off. So those are the big hits here. Did I forget anything, David?
The state cut our pilot as well. So we were supposed to get 750. They cut that back to 375 since they're having budget issues as well. So that was another hit.
Yeah, the 367, and we're still being required to do a study for them. So that's eating into that more than we had anticipated. So it's we're going to have to take some action here, and I'm not yet in a position, and I will be soon, to estimate what FY20 is going to see, what we ended up with at the end of the year. That may be a little better than what we had anticipated during the budget. Then we'll know what we've got in reserves and budget stabilization. We'll know what all that balance shows. And then we can decide what we're going to do, if we're going to try to compensate here from reserves or take some action to cut costs mid-year. So that's the next step.
Bob Burden.
Yeah, Jody, and just taking a look at this, certainly I can see on the second page where we did take about an 800 and close to $900,000 right now anticipated reduction in the taxes, I mean, utility, hotel, motel, and so forth. I would assume that when we go to the first page and we start looking at real and personal property taxes and so forth, that is going to be somewhat delayed to see what impact that may have on the budget, just by the nature of the way those monies come in. Is that correct?
I think we're going to see that impact in FY22 because right now we know what our assessment is, and that's what they're going to assess in the way of property taxes. The question is, if businesses go under and they cannot pay their personal property tax bills, that could impact us later this year. But most of that impact, if the economy has an impact on personal property taxes and starts to lower the real estate property values, that will be a delayed reaction, and we'll see that in the next year.
Well, I think it's not only businesses going under, but also just the timing of the payments that may come in as well could be an issue. Is that correct? I mean, they may eventually be able to catch up at some point, but it's a question of time.
Yeah.
I think more than anything else.
And we haven't even gotten our first large property tax receipt yet from so that's yet to show up here.
Okay, we don't anticipate any problems with that next release of money from the state. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
The income taxes in FY20 were very strong, much stronger than we anticipated. So that kind of saved us in 20. As you can see, we have recreation fees that are also lower than anticipated. Some things like building permits, they're pretty much keeping up with what we normally see on building permits.
Okay.
There are some things that are moving ahead, but if we can't get things opened up and operating normally, then stay at this lower level.
So right now we're coming to the conclusion of the first quarter of the fiscal year, and you're showing that we're down about $3.2 million.
Yes, and I will add that the fire department was successful in getting a significant grant to help pay for their self-contained breathing apparatuses, and we put that in their capital outlay budget for this year. And they had applied for it at the time, but didn't know what they were getting. So they're getting about $500,000. So that is a reduction we can take to their capital outlay budget, which will lower this amount. But it's still a significant bite.
Now, what's the cash situation of the city, though? I mean, we're seeing these numbers here. I would assume these are accrual numbers. What's the cash situation?
Well, our cash situation is fine. I just checked it yesterday. It is at the same cash level as it was at the same time last year.
Okay.
I don't know, as we go through this year is probably when we're going to see cash flow lowering, because we didn't see the revenue impacts in 20, like I said. We had enough income taxes to make up for the shortfalls we were seeing elsewhere. And that's kept our cash position strong through the summer. But if these revenue flows continue to be slow, that's when we're going to start to see a decline in our overall cash balances, and whether or not we'll need some kind of short-term line or something to get through. But right now, I don't anticipate that.
Okay, just for the record, I'll note that Alderman Arnett has arrived, and Mr. Ed Meehan also is with us. So hello, everybody. Any other questions about Jody's revenue projections? Frank?
Yeah, has any projection been done for any pent-up need, pent-up desires, places that we can look for to try to help offset the reduction?
The only thing I'll say that might pick up a bit is the hotel motel tax. We are beginning a contract with Granicus to help us identify all those here that have short-term rentals And then they're going to do the monitoring and the follow-up to make sure they're paying on a regular basis. They're collecting and paying for their stays. So I anticipate we're going to see an increase in our hotel motel taxes. I just don't know how much because of the slowed tourism in the area and, you know, the lack of the athletics and the Naval Academy activities and the college activities may reduce that, offset that.
Alderman Arnett. Oh, I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
but then there'll
Frank.
also be a reduction in expenses for the lack of city participation in the Naval Academy events too, right?
We don't normally incur much cost in relation to those. They usually pay us for police and fire services if we're doing stuff like that. So that's another place where the revenues can be.
So it's another hit for income.
Right.
Okay.
So we won't incur the overtime for that service, but we won't get reimbursed for it either.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you. Madam Finance Director, this is for the general fund. Do we have anything that shows us what's happening to the parking fund?
Not yet. I worked on those and this was the first one to get out. I almost have those ready. I will say that it was okay in 20, not great, but through the summer, you know, we were doing the free parking thing when all the traffic was downtown, and Hillman is our big money maker on the garage side. And I do have some put together, but I haven't issued anything formally on that. So the summer looked kind of bleak in the parking fund. That would be my general assessment, but they've stopped the free parking program after Labor Day. So hopefully we'll see those pick up.
So would it be fair to say if we did total revenues and expenses across all funds, this $3.3 million number will be getting bigger?
I wouldn't say that for sure. Now the transportation, what we have to worry about with these sources of revenues is the general fund, transportation fund, and parking fund kind of go together when we do our analysis. Parking fund, I hope it will be able to meet its own expenses, but it won't have any money to send to transportation.
Right. Transportation was my next.
Transportation will take a hit, but remember they have a CARES grant that allows them to use it to displace revenue. They can pay for any operating shortfalls they have. So whatever they can't meet with their other revenue sources, they're going to fill in with this grant. And it's large enough, it should carry them into FY22.
Is that the $4.2 million grant?
Yes, they had another $4.2 million. We got 4.2 and they got 4.2.
Right. Thank you.
So I'm not worried about either of those funds. It's the general fund that's you know, it's going to need some cost reductions or the determination that we need to use some reserves to help us.
Okay. Jody, I have one question, and that is, given what you're seeing here in revenue shortfalls and anticipating that the situation is not going to improve dramatically through the fiscal year, at what point do you all as staff begin looking at Plan B for expenditures and any expenditure cutbacks?
I'll defer that question to the city manager to talk about when we might address
So
expenditures.
Fred, we're doing that immediately. So we're going to have a meeting with the labor unions later this month to present the same information. We really need to have a better grasp of the expense side before we do that, because hopefully expenses will be down somewhat, but probably not to the degree that we need them to be. But we need to start having those discussions, not only for this year of how we make up this difference, but FY22 looks pretty bleak, and we have another 3% COLA that's part of the contract for FY22 that we need to talk with them about. So we're going to start that process early this year. And, you know, for FY21, for the current budget year, we had to start that late because nobody knew that COVID was going to become what it had become. So we got started with that process late with them. We want to start early. We've had some discussions with them, and we need to continue that starting later this month, so we can, you know, solicit some ideas from them as well on how we deal with these budget issues.
Thank you, David. Other questions for or comments regarding the revenue projection for this fiscal year? Hearing none, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah, thanks. Joe, do you have actually a slight increase in real estate transfer taxes? What bears that out?
We were seeing an increase in, well, you know, when you, more as properties change hands, which they may be now, as people are buying, the interest rates are low, any new activity we see, the real estate activity really has not been impacted much, the buying and the selling and the refinancing. And we don't normally get much with the changing of the refinancing, but when, I'll take that back, when people refinance, they have to come in and make sure the deed is clear. And when we do that work, we collect, I think it's like a $50 fee for checking the records to see if they owe us money. So that's also providing a little pickup in those revenues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move off of the revenue projections? Seeing none, let's move on the agenda. The next item under unfinished business is the bond authorization ordinance. We had a fairly substantial discussion about this at our last meeting, and we deferred making any recommendation or deciding if we want to make a recommendation until this meeting. It was actually going to be at the August meeting, which we did not have, but it was determined that it would still be timely if we took a position at today's meeting. So at the last meeting, I didn't hear from any of the commission members any opposition or objection or concern about the bond authorization ordinance, but I believe that it was Ed who said, well, let's give us all a month or so just to ponder it and see if we have any concerns as we look at it a little bit closer. So that's why we pushed it off. I have taken another look at it. Yeah, my feeling is the same as it was 2 months ago, and that is it seems to be a responsible, reasonable, and conservative method and approach to financing city's necessary debt. And I would support endorsing the proposal. I'd like to hear from other members of the commission.
I'll be glad to give you a summary where we're at if you'd like to know.
Sure, I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was any update on that. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to, our plan right now is to go out with an RFP and look for a short-term ban. But during that process, we're also going to give these bidders a chance to offer refinancing options if there are any. As we know, the rates are down and we might have some opportunities there. We don't have too bad a rates right now on our existing bonds. They've all been refinanced in the last few years, but we're going to look for those opportunities as well. And we are going to try to settle this borrowing before the end of October. It's important that we get it done before the election. Because there'll be a lot of turmoil in the market for the next couple months that we're going to want to get out in front of. So. We don't know what we're going to borrow yet, though. But I'm still waiting for spending estimates from public.
But the bond authorization ordinance gives a ceiling as to the most you may borrow it.
Right.
Okay. I saw Bob and then
Bob.
Jim.
Yeah, Jody, with the challenges that we're seeing on the revenue side and the potential challenges that we see down the road, and then we're looking at acquiring additional debt here. How close are we bumping up against our debt affordability targets that we've set in terms of, I think it's the 12% limit?
Mm-hmm. We'll be well within that. When we did our debt affordability analysis during the budget process, we assumed we're going to sell everything that we did the program for after 21 and prior. And we won't be selling all that. And it also would anticipate that we borrow out the rest of this equipment loan. And we did not come close to our 12%. I think we were below 11 in most of the years. We almost touched 11% in one of the years. Everything else was lower. So we're between 10 and 11%, and that was presuming we would issue it all.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Jim? Did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from any commission members?
Well, Fred, this is Ed. If I can just jump in a second.
Sure.
Is philosophically, I think we need to be, cautious and conservative in borrowing matters. I would note, however, that I think that we are being so. I think that the approach here is appropriate, and so I think it's been very helpful to have the time to look more carefully into all of this, and so I have no concerns as to what's currently on the table at all.
Thank you for your comments, Ed. I appreciate them. Bob?
No, I was just going to say that I'll go ahead and make the motion that we recommend concurrence with the recommendation here and move forward with it.
So your motion is for the fact to recommend approval of the bond authorization ordinance.
That's correct.
Okay, that's a motion made. Is there a second to that? Frank Brown, second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much, team. Kim, I'd ask that you prepare one of those sheets for the fact indicating support, recommendation of support for the bond authorization ordinance. If you need to email it to me for review, feel free to do so, and I can get back to you on that pretty quickly. And I understand, Jody, this is still on the agenda for next Monday night. So we need to move fairly quickly on this.
And the Finance Committee has already recommended it for council approval.
Okay, so that's good to hear. All right, Kim, any problem doing that for me? Kim not here?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I heard you, and I'll do a little free form on that, but send it to you for approval. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Kim. Appreciate the help.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Next, David. I'll go to David. Is there any update on the State Resiliency Authority status?
We're working hard on it. We've got a large work group of county and city people that were formed to take a look at this. We've formed 3 subcommittees. One is looking at the organizational structure for the authority. One's looking at revenue/financing, and one's looking at potential projects. And each of those subcommittees is meeting regularly to make recommendations on their particular areas. The goal is to have legislation prepared that can be introduced either in late December or in January to both the county and the city to actually stand up that organization. So that's still the target date. That's an aggressive goal. That a lot of work needs to be done. There's really no good model for this, at least in the resilience world. There's a stadium authority that was stood up in Baltimore, and they've done a lot of good things. So that's one model that we can look at. But there hasn't been a resilience authority that we know of. So this is kind of starting from scratch. And so a lot of work to be done, and a lot of work being done. And we're targeting, as I said, the end of the year to have draft legislation.
Okay, any questions of Jim? Yes, Alderman Arnett.
David, could you say the 3 subcommittees again? I missed the first one.
Yeah. And so the city has memberships. I'll mention who is on each of those. So the first is the organizational structure of the Resilience Authority. That's the one that I'm on. The second is looking at revenue sources. So of course, Jody's on that subcommittee. And then the third is the types of projects that will be undertaken by the authority. And Mike Johnson, our new Public Works Director, is on that committee.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for David Zero? Hearing none. David, thank you for the update. And, we've made it known and you've acknowledged many times our interest in seeing this as it goes forward. So whenever you feel that you have something, even conceptually, that you want to run by us, feel free to do so. Just let me know, okay?
I will. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda under new business, it's really new business or old business, I'm not sure, is spending affordability. And I put this on the agenda at the request of, or suggestion of Bob at the last meeting. He and Ed Meehan last February gave us a very fine report about spending affordability. And that was, what was it, February 12th, and made some recommendations about the city and the finance department working together to develop a spending affordability initiative that would generate an annual report. And we really didn't follow up on that. We accepted the report as presented by Bob, and we said we would talk about it some more at a later date. Today may or may not be the day we want to begin talking about this. I don't know if anybody's really had an opportunity to think about it. I did send out another copy of Bob and Ed's report with the email of the meeting material for today. But I did not speak with Bob or Jody or anybody else about this subject before the meeting. So I don't know if we're really prepared to go forward with this, or even what the next steps should be. Bob, I'm going to turn to you and put you on the spot for a minute. You and Ed, when you prepared this report and gave it to us, did the two of you have any thoughts as to next steps and how we get from your recommendation to actual implementation?
Well, if you go to the page 3 of the report, we had 4 different recommendations. And really, the next steps would need to be considered after the Financial Advisory Commission made the decision to go ahead and take on such a function and providing advisory opinions on the spending affordability capability of the city each year, which would be part of the budget process. Just to take a quick step, and I can go briefly again through the report, and very briefly at that, but as Ed and I put it together, we consulted the spending affordability function of both Anne Arundel County and the state of Maryland. And in the course of doing that, the reason why we focused on those two is that we felt that much as Anne Arundel County uses shared resources with the state of Maryland to obtain the data to make their recommendations, to review and make their recommendations, we felt that if the city were to engage in this type of activity, that it would want to work with the county and the sharing of data, being that in some ways the economy of Annapolis is somewhat a subset of the economy of Anne Arundel County, as the county is of the state. We reviewed the structures and the roles of the spending affordability functions in both the state and the county, both the county and the state in the report. And in all instances, both the county and the state, they're spending affordability committees or commissions or whatever. they provide advisory opinions to their legislative and executive functions of their governments. Now, one thing that we did notice is that the county and the state's spending affordability advisory opinions are predicated upon the ability of the taxpayers within those jurisdictions to finance and service the the debt of the various governing entities, as well as the spending that is projected to occur as the budget's put together. In essence, those two jurisdictions look at the growth of the economy, within their jurisdictions, if you will, whether it's the county or the state. At present, the city doesn't do that. We have several other metrics that we use when we're looking at our debt affordability. And even when it comes to putting the budget together, I would assume the report doesn't necessarily suggest that we change wholesale, but that we perhaps add that component to the metrics that we already use to provide a full picture and putting the advisory opinion together if we decide to do that each year. And then actually that's pretty much the extent of the report, except for the 4 recommendations at the end. So the next question is, does the Financial Advisory Commission feel that they want to become engaged in this part of our advisory function to the mayor and to the city council, where we, in the course of the budget process, generally at the beginning, make a recommendation as to what the spending affordability guardrails should be, if you will, as the budget's put together. And again, it's an advisory opinion, much like the county and the state commissions provide.
Okay. Go ahead, Alderman Arnett, and I had a question for Bob, but go ahead.
I just wanted to supply some background information. First, we've met, we being Jody and David and the Finance Committee, and we're going to change the way we do the budget process this year, starting with a kickoff meeting with the council and the department heads, sort of a budget retreat in October. And we're also going to try to add more dates for the budget process and streamline that process. So any kind of adventure like this is most timely. Second, I would point to you that in the Finance Committee report for this year's budget, we did something of our own spending affordability, because we looked at the increase in the wage bill and we looked at the increase in primarily the property tax revenue. And we saw that the wage bill is growing at 3 times the rate of the property taxes, and has been for quite a long time. And
Give me,
so
Alderman Arnett, what was that? The what bill?
the wage bill, the amount of money we pay our
Wages.
staff.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
And there are some structural issues within how we pay our staff, because it's pretty much pegged to our negotiations with the public safety unions, and then everybody else falls in line and gets that same level of pay increase, more or less. It's not a given, but that's how it tends to work out. Now, that's where we have our most urgent problem, because it's very hard, particularly for police, to recruit. So we have to pay higher wages and also give out things like take-home cars and so on. But that has the impact of driving all of the rest of the wage. So up front end loader operator gets that same level of increase. All of the exempt staff, all of our expensive staff, like our engineers and so forth, they're all getting it. And I think one of the things that we need to do, and I'm going to urge on the Finance Committee, is that we look at mechanisms to separate those increases. They really should be identified differentially. But the point of bringing this up is the Finance Committee tried to raise the red flag that we've got a problem that we really need to be paying attention to. Now you add to that the current financial circumstances and the initial reporting that we had on the revenue today, and David Gerald's comment earlier in this meeting that fiscal 22 is not looking very good. And I think that that is really speaking very directly to, can we afford to provide all of the goods and services that we're providing now at the cost, the price of providing them, which is at least 70% compensation. So I think we have soon will have thrust upon us a need to do this very kind of analysis. And Bob, you mentioned one of the things that the county looks at is the taxpayer burden and whether they can bear the increase. Typically, the solution for the council, and I've been part of 13 years of it, has passed this on to the taxpayers in the form of changes in the property tax rate. And I think that that day is drawing to a close. All of the taxpayers out there, both residents and businesses, and especially businesses, are going through the same hard times, particularly with the virus, as everyone else. And so in 22, for the 22 budget, if we're facing tough times, I don't think we can just automatically turn to, we'll raise the property tax rate. So I think that I personally would urge, because you know I'm a big fan of the FAC anyway, that this could be a role that the FAC, I agree with Bob, we ought to rely on the people who already have experience, the county and the state, but particularly the county, and also have all the data. Because it's very hard to get data down at the city level for the more aggregate like GNP and national income and all of those measures. It's tough to get it at the county level, but getting it down to the city level. So I almost feel we have little choice but to piggyback on the county. And David already mentioned in this financial authority, we're already working, and we have had a very good, really over the years, but particularly with these two administrations, very good relationships between the two, the governmental jurisdictions. And why not take advantage of that with this and see what we could do to pick up immediately on what the county's doing with their affordability and see how much we can just latch onto that as giving us at least, or giving you at least a notion of where things are headed. But I think it's long overdue, really, but certainly time is of the essence here. I think that if we're going to be good planners and good managers, we've really got to be serious about this. And we won't have a choice, but we will be doing it in crisis if we delay any longer. So sorry for the long colloquy, but I think this is a very important thing. And I think that the FAC has the standing with the council and everyone else that you could offer us your counsel and it would be taken to heart.
Thank you, Alderman. Did I see Jim with your hand up or no? No.
No.
Okay. Bob, in looking through your report and certainly your 4 recommendations that you referred to, it seems that a lot of the work that would go into this would be finance department staff generated. Is that an accurate assessment? Or through consultants engaged by finance department? Are those accurate assessments, or I'm misreading it?
Well, I think the fact itself does not have any staff support or anything of that nature. So we would depend upon collaborating with Jody's office and with David's office there, and working with the county for the shared resources in terms of acquiring the data. So yes, it would be a collaborative effort. And as we gather the data and we start reviewing it, that would be the foundation from which a recommendation would eventually be derived from. Yeah, I would say that one thing, if we go forward with this, we would need to establish a baseline year that baseline year may be this year, or it could be next year or previous year, whatever. But we need to establish a baseline year if we're going to measure the ability of the taxpayer constituency of the city, to be able to afford or underwrite the expenditures and the debt, that the city is going to incur in subsequent budget years. And actually, if we do attach that growth to the ability of the taxpayer to be able to service it, which is what the county and the state do, then that would make sense. So there you have it.
Thank you. Ed, as the co-author of that report to the fact, do you have any comments you'd like to add over and above what Bob just said?
Well, actually, what I would say is I'm completely on board with what Bob had said, and I don't think anybody could have said it better than the alderman. So that's where I would leave it, because I think those are the points that we need to consider.
Okay, let me turn now to Jody and David. You've heard the discussion. You may or may not have read the report, but much of this, recommendation is directed to staff-generated work, and either through your existing staff or through engaged consultants or however you do it. Because the fact, we're volunteers, we don't have, at least I know I don't, and maybe many of the other members don't have the, financial expertise to be able to acquire and really fully dig into, all of the data we're potentially talking about. If the fact, said, yes, this is a worthwhile exercise that we should go through, do you and your office and your resources have the capability to handle that?
I think a lot of this is going to be gathering data, and that may or may not be easy. The county, I'm sure, will pass along what they have. Whether or not it's directly applicable to us, that's another question. That takes another layer of analysis. There are groups in Maryland. There's a group up in Towson. I refer to them as Resi. They do a lot of this analysis for our area. But what I don't know is, do they charge for access to their data, or if we ask them to further into Annapolis and partition the numbers and the data down to the Annapolis area, if that's going to cost extra. So most of it's data gathering. Depending on what you want us to do with that data, that would be the answer to the time constraint. How much do we have to do?
Okay.
You just need the data. You just need the statistics, the anticipated growth, and that kind of thing. And that's easier than having to crunch numbers and do all kinds of sets of projections and stuff.
Okay. Bob?
Yes, there's actually 4 resources, and Jody mentioned one of them, which is Resi. The other is the SAGE Policy Group, Moody's, and Global Insight.
And EBRI.
And EBRI, right. Now, these are the resources for the data. And these 4 groups are already, compiling data for other jurisdictions. What we may want to do, Jody, is if we proceed with this, is to sit down, with one or more of those data providers, convey to them what we're attempting to do, as well as consult with the county as to how they acquire their data from them. And they could probably map out what type of data that would be perhaps most pertinent to the objectives that we want to achieve, and how we would pull that data together to be able to get a reasonable enough picture to make a recommendation, an advisory recommendation that could help guide the city as it goes through its budget process. These are all good questions, and they're all very valid concerns, but I think that we can address them if we decide to go forward by meeting with 1 or 2 or 3 of these groups that already do these for other jurisdictions, tell them what we're trying to do, and they could perhaps guide and advise us as to what data
Right.
we need and how we would be able to, utilize that data.
And then, and meeting and discussing with them, there's always a question if they're going to, what they're going to charge us for that time.
Well, Jody, that's
Free, but, or maybe it's not.
yeah. Well, Jody, that's a good point you raised. And the question is, well, we're looking at cost or we're looking at investment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's take a look at that. I mean, if the investment is reasonable enough that it provides the city with good quality, sound information from which to guide its decision-making going forward, we're going to save a whole lot more money and perhaps prevent problems down the road than if we were to try to continue on with the process that we have. And I think that's what we have to measure it against with the investment, provide us with the necessary and an important return to justify itself. And we won't know that until we actually start taking the first step.
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion, and that is if the FAC, want to take the next step moving forward, that Bob, you and Ed as the subcommittee, collaborate with Jody and figure out what that next step should be and how we get from here to there and what the resources are, and develop perhaps a model or a protocol to make the most efficient use of time and money to get the results that we want to achieve.
Okay, I would assume, Fred, by the direction you're going, that the intent of the fact is to recognize that this is a function that we are definitely interested in possibly taking on. We just want to add a little bit more meat to the bones, before we, dive into it completely. Is that where you're coming from on this? Or?
Yeah, I think so, but I think that I would want at least a consensus of the fact that it is appropriate and desirable to take this next step to move forward.
Okay.
I don't know that we have enough information to be able to dive in 100%, and say, yes, this is something we want to take on. This is how we do it. And this is what it's going to cost. And yes, it's a worthwhile investment. I don't have enough information to do that. But personally, I think after hearing everything, reading the report again, it's an exercise well worth pursuing. So I would suggest that the FAC, either by motion or by consensus, request you and Ed as a subcommittee to collaborate with Jody and figure out, see if you can determine an appropriate path forward to accomplish the objectives laid out in your report.
Okay.
Alderman.
Yes, two points. One, you also have a former FAC member that does this as a profession. And I almost worry that he left the FAC because he wanted to be around to potentially snap up this business. So I would urge caution, but he has done this kind of work, Dr. Cater. But two, I am going to be reporting this to the Finance Committee at our next meeting because I report on your meetings or try to. And I feel very strongly that this is an important part of financial management. I think the council has its role as the stewards of the city, but really, I think that I know that there's a data collection and getting it going, but I can't help but believe this is a boon to the administration, to both David and Jody, when we sit down and do our budget making, and also when the mayor justifies his budget to the council. I mean, there are bounds. We just can't keep going the way we're going forever and expect it to work out okay. And when you say, no, we can't raise taxes anymore, and we're going to have to look at reductions in service, this is something that would provide that support, because there's going to be strong resistance to reducing services, not just from the departments, but from all of the people in the city who want those services. They just don't want to pay for them. And that's the age-old problem of government. Everybody wants anything you can give them, but they don't want the bill. And we need to show why we have to have some kind of restraint and some rigor in how we do this budgeting and how we tax our citizens or don't provide certain services anymore.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, Ed, why don't you and I, connect offline and, look at how best to take this next step that Fred is suggesting. And then at that point, Jody, we can connect with you and David, and, begin the process of starting to put a little bit more of this together so that we can bring it back to the Financial Advisory Commission, to answer any additional questions they may have and show what more fully may be involved and taking this responsibility on. Does that work for you, Ed and Jody and David?
It is Ed. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, yes, let's do
Okay.
that.
Okay. Jody, you good with that?
I was waiting for David to speak. I think.
Yeah,
he-
no,
David,
I
I'm sorry.
agree. I mean, I think we all know that this would be really valuable, but I think we also know that the finance department is their plates are full already, probably overflowing, especially Jody. So we just need to make sure that we approach this properly, so we're getting a lot of value and not overtaxing the finance department.
David, I think you're absolutely right, and that's why I
Yeah.
suggested further discussions between our subcommittee and staff to see if and how it can be done in a manageable way, personnel wise and cost wise. So, fact members, do I hear any objection to proceeding in the manner we just described? I'm not going to ask for a formal vote, but I just want to make sure we have consensus. Faye, Frank, any objection? Just shake your head, yes, no. Ed, Bob, I know you're on board, and Jim, I know you're on board. So, all right, and I'm on board. So we have a full consensus with full Financial Advisory Commission. So Bob and Ed, you have your marching orders or request from us, and Jody and David, if you can work with our subcommittee and see if you can all find a way to make something happen here, okay? Thank you very much. That's the end of our agenda.
We didn't hear of the Audit Committee report.
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay. It
We
was
did
brief.
that first. It was very brief, but we did
I
have
think it
a
was before you came
report that there were some defects or some people who have left the Audit Committee and vacancies need to be refilled. See, I was listening. All right, our next meeting, next regularly scheduled meeting is October 8th, 8 o'clock. It'll be presumably Zoom unless we hear otherwise. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Hearing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved.
Okay, I saw three hands, so I know there's a move by Bob, a second by Frank, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, hey, thanks, everybody, and good seeing